Welcome to the Embodiment Podcast. This show is for you if you see the body as more than a brain taxi. It's for people interested in coming home to the body as a holistic aspect of who we are and how we live. Episodes contain practical tips, exercises you can take away, and interviews with specialists from around the world. I'm your host for today, Mark Walsh. On the show today, Tad Hargraves. So Tad is my sort of go-to person I recommend for marketing for all of my students coming out of yoga, movement arts, martial arts. I've been following his Marketing for Hippies brand for some time, read several of his ebooks on niching, on copywriting. I just find him continuously accessible, useful, and no bullshitty. And there's very few people in the marketing space that I would recommend to the majority of my tribe because they just don't like the very feel of marketing, how it's normally done. So when I came across Tad stuff, I was like, okay, this is a breath of fresh air. This is super useful. And he's the first person I've had on the show who's really talking about this aspect of it. So I just think it will be so useful for listeners. So Tad, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really good to be here.
I know you're a little bit unwell today, so if you sound husky, we should say to listeners, you're not on your deathbed, but not at your best, right?
That's true. That's true.
And where are you in the world, just to place you?
I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, which is in the prairies of Canada, just a few hours from the Rocky Mountains, a little bit north of Calgary.
Great. And the question I always ask all the embodiment people we have on is what's your journey with the body? And I think that might be an interesting place to start with you as well before we get into the main body of your work. So tell us a little bit about your story, particularly as regards the bodily side of that.
Oh my! Well, it's I'm flattered that you would think I've had a conscious relationship with that at all. I suppose one piece that comes is, in my experience, the body doesn't lie. It always seems to tell me when I've been doing too much. And, there's a book, I don't know if you've read it, Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my father died from multiple sclerosis and when I was 9. And I remember I read that book. And of course, the core thesis of the book is that a lot of autoimmune diseases are the result of a kind of type A personality that just will never rest, that's just always pushing. And I remember I asked my mom, I said, was that Dad? And she just nodded and said, yeah, he'd get cortisone shots and he'd feel so much better. And then he would just use that to go and do more work. So, so certainly I've had a penchant for that. And then my body has given me some very clear signals. I've burned out entirely a few times where I just collapsed in a heap, nothing left in the tank. And I had to stop doing pretty much every volunteer project I was doing. But as it's connected to marketing, one of the ways this has shown up is when we talk about, the core theme of my work is that marketing can feel good. And, I suppose ultimately what that means is you're relaxed in your body. You feel comfortable in your own skin about what you're doing. That if it doesn't feel good, you just won't do it, is the reality of it. You'll avoid it. Won't look like you're not doing it. It'll just look like, I've got some more Facebook to do. I got to send some more emails. I got to do these errands, and it just doesn't happen. But a lot of that is we feel so uncomfortable with it. And around pricing, Mark Silver, one of my colleagues, has a beautiful process around helping people figure out their price called resonant pricing. And the basic idea is, so you're trying to figure out your hourly rate. So you would start with an amount that's way too small. So you say, well, £1 an hour. And your body will just tell you it's too little. And then you might say, okay, £1,000 an hour. Oh God, that's way too much. Okay, £50 an hour, 500. And you go back and forth, and maybe you settle around £75 an hour. So there's a very specific point, and the body just relaxes. And it's not necessarily that logical. It's not. But if you try to charge an amount that's too little, you'll resent it and your business just won't work and you'll go broke. But if you try to charge an amount that's too much, you also probably just won't even, people say, what do you charge? Say, it's on my website. You can go check, or you'll say it and you say, I charge five, I charge five, and you can't get it out almost, or the whole rhythm of what you're doing changes. And so it's funny, I've told people this in workshops. It's just, your body is not going to lie. It's going to tell you the truth about the price. And it may seem higher or lower than you think you should charge, but it's better to go with the one that your body says yes to. I mean, this is, of course, assuming you've looked at the facts, you've looked at the numbers, you know what your profit margins are, and you know what your expenses are, your debt, you've done all that. Assuming you have that, which is not safe to assume, then being guided by one's body and how it feels in relation to, because this is what's happening. I think that we're not even aware of when we're doing marketing or when we're on the receiving end of marketing. Stuart Wilde?
No.
He was I think he was British, but he was, or maybe Australian. Anyways, he wrote this book called Silent Power, but there's a line in it where he's just saying, energetically, we're always voting yes or no to the people we meet. There's something in our body that is either kind of relaxing or tensing when we meet people.
Right.
And I just think that's a very true thing. One of the things I talk about in the marketing workshop is my core day-long workshop is this dynamic between collapsing and posturing.
Mm-hmm.
Collapsing, we make ourselves very small and don't take up a lot of space, and posturing, make ourselves very big. So it's the high school nerd archetype versus, the best archetype maybe the world's ever created is currently in the White House. Although I hear you have your own version over there these days.
Yeah, we're a bit behind, but we're competing. We're going for it. Yeah.
But this kind of posturing, this kind of puffing up, and the reality is that both of those feel terrible to be around. Uh-huh. Most of the clients that I work with, and probably you work with, would tend towards the collapsing. And the mainstream business world is just so much on the posturing side. And it's easy to say, oh, well, yes, the posturing, and wag your fingers at that. That's terrible. And that's, contrived and artificial. But it's not a vacation to be around someone who's collapsed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's saying, could you please just take my self-esteem and hold that? Thank you. Cradle that in your arms. So there's this other possibility of composure. And, if you imagine like the higher point on the triangle, it's not stuck in between those two, and it's composure being, and this comes from some of my friends, Kendra Decker-Kunoff, Brian Bayer with the Authentic World group in the States. But I love that one of the ways Decker talked about, he said, I wouldn't even use the word confidence because, for composure, because collapsing clearly comes across as a lack of confidence, and posturing comes across as an overconfidence. But he said, composure is more just comfort in your own skin.
Yes.
And so when you're around somebody who's comfortable in their own skin, you just relax. I remember meeting Jane Goodall, and she had that. I've met her a few times, and she has that vibe. When you're around her, everything in your body just gears down. So to me, this is what we're going for, is that we would have such a way on our marketing, or such a presence that our own body is relaxed in it, and the bodies of the people we are connecting with are relaxed in it, because it's that's ultimately where the transaction is going to happen. I suppose they're either going to be saying yes or no, and a lot of it is not logical. It's not. Yeah. It's not right on the surface.
Yeah. I guess we could make a comparison here to say, like, Stephen Porges' work. Like, is the marketing fight-flight driven? Like I did there's only one other podcast on marketing, which I did just on my own for this podcast. And I talk about Jedi versus Sith marketing. And the Jedi marketing is very much your kind of style of things. And the Sith marketing is fear-driven. The traditional marketing is be afraid of this. It's generating emotions of fear or anger or something like that, and to sell from that sense of scarcity or lack. And another way of doing things is to actually have people in a sense of safety. So that's quite a shift. I almost feel like there needs to be another word for this, because the word marketing has got such a negative association. I would say for 80 to 90% of the people listening to this would have a negative association with that word.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, me too in a lot of ways. But, it was a month ago. I was in the UK for a couple of months, and I think this notion came to me there. So if you've ever been to London Or, oh gosh, I mean, so many of the cities, Europe has a much better market kind of scene than we do. But I went to the Borough Market. But, I've been to the Portobello Market as well. And they've done studies on this where they found that farmers market, these kind of craft markets, there are 10 times more conversations that happen there than happen at a Tesco or a co-op or any kind of supermarket. And so there's something about the market that is really delightful. You get to see friends, you're catching up with people, you're seeing vendors that you probably shop at on a regular basis. You're getting to know them by name. They know you by name. They see you and say, "Oh, the regular." Yeah, I mean, the regular. And what is the market? It's the place where the community gets to come back together and say, "Hey, here's what I've been up to since I saw you last," and get to show you. And it's a way that the community can come and support itself. And in the UK and Europe as a whole, I mean, of course, I made the joke often when I was in the UK. I said, that building over there, that's older than my country, because Canada is maybe 160 years old. And so there's a much older architecture, and there's so much beautiful mason work, stone mason work. And you get these arches. They're so beautiful, those stone arches. And it's such an amazing design. I don't know how people make these things, because you get the stones and they go up straight, and that makes sense. But then they turn towards each other and they meet in the middle. And there's that keystone in the middle that, shaped in the way it is, kind of like a triangle a bit. And that's where they meet. So if we could imagine that stone in the middle, that's the market. But then on the two sides, the stones that come up to meet it, they're resting on two stones, two foundation stones that keep that gateway steady. And one of those stones I would call goodwill, and the other one I would call sustenance. And that the market is where those two things meet when everything's working. If it really is the market, there's a sense of conviviality, of trust, of safety, as you're saying, this immense goodwill. Plus, people are fed, in all the ways that we could mean, fed and clothed and sustained in their days. And if those two things aren't happening, we can't call it the market. I don't think. It's got to be some other thing. And of course, if you rewind human history far enough, we have gift economies where there's no official market. There's just people taking care of each other. And there's an immense spirit of goodwill and mutual sustenance. And that mutual sustenance expands beyond the human world and includes all the non-human participants of the world, the unseen. All of that becomes a part of that flow of sustenance and goodwill. So the market we have is this human echo, this remnant of that. And so when I say it's goodwill, another way to say that is it has to feel good. And when I say sustenance, I mean it has to work. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to say, people, but this, I just want to do something that feels good. And I say, well, tell me your marketing plan. They tell me, and I can tell it does feel good to them. But it's useless. It's never going to work. It's not going to do anything. And they just don't know that yet. So it has to be both. And so if you stand in the middle of a market and you hear that murmur around you of all those conversations, we could imagine that sound is the sound of the marketplace being itself. You're in the body of the marketplace, and that body is doing what it does, and you're hearing the sound of it. And if you open your eyes, you can look, you can see the way that the market moves. And so if we turn that into a verb, that's marketing. Mm-hmm. That's the market being itself. So that's what we're trying to go for, I think, in our approach is, can we reenact that old ritual and tradition of people coming together to share what they've been up to since you saw them last, and where it happens in that same spirit of goodwill, conviviality, and safety. To me, that's the goal.
Mm-hmm. And why are so many people from, I know what you sometimes call conscious spaces or green spaces, or an embodiment people are mostly in that category? They're coming out of yoga, they're coming out of fire rhythms, they're coming out of, imagine similar to your clients in many ways. This is why I got you on the show, and I would have there's no other marketing person I can think to invite, to be honest. Like, why do people from those kind of backgrounds have such difficulty with this area? If it's just like, hey, this is what I do, this is what I'm offering, would that be useful for you?
Well, because they get it, because we've all been on the receiving end of most of the marketing. We've been on the receiving end of it's terrible. And it's deeper than that. I have a friend, Omar Friella, and he lives in, I think it's Harlem in the East Coast of the United States. And he runs and has been very passionate about worker-owned co-op businesses, particularly for people of color. And I asked him one day, I said, why do you care so much about co-ops? And he said, because we're told that we live in a democracy, but we grow up in families that are not democracies. We go to schools that are not democracies. We then get jobs in businesses that are not democracies. And then we're expected every 4 years to just kind of get intuitively how democracy works. So at least with a worker-owned co-op, you're having this daily experience as an adult of a democracy when it's working well. And so I would just say a similar thing of we grow up in families that are coercive. We go to schools that are coercive. We go into jobs that are coercive and manipulative. And then we're just expected to know how to relate to other human beings in a non-coercive, non-manipulative way. So I think most of the relationships we've had come from a basis of unacknowledged coercion and power. And then if you add to that the fact that this is explicitly taught in most marketing stuff, you're explicitly told, go for the sale. That's the goal when you're in these interactions, is to get the sale. So yeah, there's this aversion, but what I've seen so much of is there's this, most of the people I work with, they're collapsed in some way, partly by predilection. I think they also tend to be introverted, and they tend to, there's all that. And then they realize that doesn't work. At a certain point, man, this collapsing is not paying the bills. So, but then they see all these seminars of people selling the posturing thing, and they sit in the seminars, if they have the misfortune to do so, and they see all the people running to the back with their credit cards to sign up for these expensive coaching programs. And I think, oh, well, this works. I guess this works. So I could posture a little bit, and then they try it. And then their friends say, oh my God, what happened to you? And, oh God, I'm so sorry. And they go back to collapsing. So, and, to add to that, I think humans are just shy creatures. I think this seems to be the reality of human. When you're a kid and you meet somebody new, you just hide behind your mom for 5 minutes, and then you're okay. And I think when traditional people would meet each other, a very slow approach to meeting other tribes and other people, and yet everything in marketing is just saying, go dive right in, make a powerful first impression. So
Which to me, it works. Strange thing to do, yeah. Like a cat came into my house for the first time yesterday, and it didn't just run in and be like, hey, I'm a cat, get a load of me. It was like looking at me, checking me out, seeing if I'm safe. Like that's a natural kind of approach.
Bingo.
Kind of thing.
Yeah. Exactly. For pretty much all life, that's a very natural approach, not to just barge in and introduce yourself. There's a slow, are you safe? A lot of checking each other out. And depending on how much trauma the other one's been through, it's going to be a little slower. Have you ever seen the movie The Horse Whisperer?
Yeah, about the guy who's able to talk to the horses, and he approaches them quietly, and amazing. Yeah.
There's that scene. I mean, it doesn't spoil too much, but there's a traumatized horse, and Robert Redford is the horse whisperer, and this horse is just standing by itself in a field, and he walks out in the field, and he just crouches down a fair distance away from the horse, and he waits for hours. He just sits there until the horse comes to him. That's a more faithful rendering of marketing.
Yeah.
Because here's part of the challenge too. When people say, but Tad, it works. I've been to those workshops. It works. Aha. Here's what you don't see is that the next day, 90% of the people call in and ask for refunds.
Wow.
I mean, it's not always, but I heard that as a story that happened in London at one of these raw business workshops. Yeah. When you come in and you push that hard, can you coerce people? Can you persuade people? Sure, in the short term. But then they get home and their spouse says, you spent how much money on what? Are you,
Yeah.
And once they're, the other, had a client in my mentorship program, she went to the
program of a colleague of mine. And she walked in saying, I'm not going to sign up for their big coaching program. She found another woman who's in the same place, said, okay, let's agree. We're not going to sign up. Right. Okay. Keep each other strong. Perfect. And they both signed up for the thing. And she regretted it afterwards. And she was so puzzled. And we talked about it quite a bit. She said, why did I sign up? And because it was an $11,000 thing. She put $11,000 US on her credit card, just boom, right there. And I said, first of all, when you signed the contract, did they slow you down and go over the contract with you in detail? No, they didn't. Yeah. And I said, and just, at the risk of being a little risque on this, most of us have had the experience, let's say in intimate relationships, of becoming aroused and doing things that afterwards, oh God, why did I do that? And might have had the experience of somebody intentionally arousing us. Mm-hmm. And just when we're aroused, we're not our most sane,
sure.
sober selves. But so I said to her, it sounds like from your description of the workshop, that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
Was to turn you on. And she stopped.
I see from a somatic point of view, I see a lot of sort of state pumping. You know what I mean? Like getting people in that aroused state, like that's a normal feature of a lot of workshops.
And, other ways that happens is you do kind of pseudo ritual stuff, which taps into some real deep something in people, and also the love bombing, people hugging each other and the person on stage saying you're also special and unique and all this. So it's you're getting people into this aroused, turned on state. And in that state, people do things they might regret. So all of this is, I think, to say that the people you and I work with probably, and this isn't to say that there's any kind of specialness here, but I just think there's people start to see it at a certain point, and it's very uncomfortable because the thought is, shit, do I have to do that to sell anything, to sustain myself and my business? Do I have to so fundamentally contravene the function of goodwill in community in order to be sustained? Is this going to be a one-sided archway that's going to collapse and hurt myself and other people? And I've talked with so many clients who come to me, and I remember this one time I was talking with a rabbi who was working. We're not Jewish at all. I don't know how my mom got a rabbi as a life coach, but this is what happened. And he mentioned he's not very good at marketing. She mentioned her son has this business, and then she mentioned it to me. I said, just give him an hour of my time. He sounds like he's been helpful to you. And so he and I talked. He was a lovely guy, but he said, I speak at these synagogues, and it feels very strange at the end of a talk to then say, go buy my home study program. That feels that would be off in some way. And I said, yeah, Rabbi Michael, that would be very off. You're right. You're not crazy. It's true. But I could feel how he was trying to, work his way through it of, well, maybe it shouldn't feel off. Maybe there's something wrong with me that feels off. And this is the way it often gets spun is, well, if you're not willing to just barge into a room and say your message real loud to everyone there and pump everyone's hand so hard, firm handshake, and get on stage and brag about yourself. If you don't want to do those things, it must be you don't value yourself. You don't believe in yourself. And
there is something in this for some. I mean, maybe you're taking this to a Canadian edge, a little bit. Like there are some people I think that do have a personal thing about being seen and putting themselves forward, and they can kind of hide behind an ethical kind of reason for not marketing. But I'm with you. There is this somatic radar, this body feel of, is this just weird? Is this too much? Like that there is something in that, though. I do know some people that I've definitely got students who just have an issue, just like being a bit more visible, and they are just a bit shy in that way. There's personal things there.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I would say, with this rabbi, I just said, instead of working on yourself to feel comfortable saying that, what if you had whoever the rabbi was of the synagogue who hosted you, if they said, thank you, Rabbi Michael, for coming and sharing your good words. Like a lot of the kids these days, Rabbi Michael has a website, and he has program you can learn from him on the internet. I've heard about, feel free, rabbimichael.com, is that it, or whatever the website, And then that would feel okay if the host did it. Or, another example of this is
much more comfortable.
People go to networking events, and it's a very the whole thing of networking events is very strange because you're going to promote yourself and you're meeting strangers constantly throughout the night. And so I got this, I think it was from, who was it? Maybe it was from a colleague of mine, Bill Barron. I can't recall, but it's too good. He said, well, I'll just give him credit on this one. He said, when you go to a networking event, instead of, first of all, go with a friend, go with a colleague who you admire and you trust. And throughout the whole night, you network for them and they network for you.
The wingman theory.
That's a better game, because you can rave about your friend in ways that would be utterly inappropriate to do about yourself, and they can rave about you. And it's more fun to do for everyone, for the people receiving it and for you. So, these are examples of, I just find it almost always there's a way to do the thing that would feel good. I remember in a workshop, a woman said she felt very uncomfortable public speaking, and because I was using a lot of those examples of leading workshops or intro talks and things. And I looked at her, and she was this shy kind of Spanish woman. I said, my guess is you would feel more comfortable if instead of standing at the front, you were sitting. And I could see her shoulders drop. Oh yeah. And I said, and my guess is you'd feel more comfortable if you were sitting in a circle with people than you were standing at the front, Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. It's the same thing.
Right.
She could lead a whole workshop just sitting in a circle. But so a lot of times there's just this wondering of what's the way to do this that would feel good, but still work.
That's nice, huh?
Yeah.
What's the way to do this that would feel good but still work? Because as you say, it has to have both those components, the efficacy and also this. Feel good is not a small thing, right? It's not feel good is like it fits with my values. It's not feel good like it's always fun, right? There's a rightness to good marketing, I would say.
And of course they relate to each other, because there's something about goodwill itself that sustains us. There's something about goodwill that feeds us. I just read a university paper. A friend of mine, Tibor Falzett from the University of Edinburgh, and it was a paper looking at idioms in the Scottish Gaelic language for the enjoyment of music and the arts, where they would say, oh, it's so good, I could eat it, but they're talking about a song. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how much of the oral culture and music would have happened in the ceilidh houses and in visits to people's homes, where a little bit of food comes out, so you're enjoying food, but people are also doing handcrafts and people are singing and telling stories, and that it was really deeply understood that this was feeding people in some way, that goodwill was a food. But also, when we find out some process or path that can really sustain us, that feels good. So they're very mutually intertwined, these things. It's, because if with the resonant pricing thing, if you do the numbers and you think it through and you really sit down, you meditate on it, it's not going to feel good if you pick a price that's too low.
Yeah.
Your body will just rebel against the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
So it's a reliable, in my experience, if you go deep with it, we're not just talking about feel good as in party time. We're talking about a deep sense of relaxation and safety in your body. And that's almost always achievable. I mean, of course, there's personal work to do and there's traumas that people have endured and there's all that. But I just find
too, right? Like my British students struggle with this much more than American students.
Sure.
Like there's definitely some cultural stuff happening, and you do a lot of work in the UK, so I'm guessing you've seen some differences.
Although I'll say this about the UK: you invented the tabloids, so you're not off the hook on all this. But yeah, there is a lot of cultural stuff, and still it can work. I mean, because fundamentally, to go back to the very basics of marketing, the reason. So I imagine there's 3 roles of marketing, and this is part of the challenge. Is it's been so reconfigured as there's only one role of marketing. That's to get the sale, and if you get the sale, it worked. If you didn't, it failed. And this I got from a book, Monopolize Your Marketplace, and this is my kind of reconfiguration or rendering of it. But if we can imagine, there's 3 roles of marketing. The first one is to get their attention. Second one is to kind of filter and see if it's a fit. And the third one is to lower the risk of them taking the first step. So the safety thing in a big way. But getting the attention piece, that's fundamentally word of mouth. That's how attention is actually gained. But then wait, how do we get word of mouth? You have to be good at what you do. at the end of the day, people have to get better if you're a healer. If you make a product, it can't just fall apart right away.
Just to jump in there, Ted, how does that fit with the kind of attention economy of, things flashing up, or people using, very glitzy things or shocking things? It seems like on social media, for example, there's just a huge amount of attention grabbing content. You think that's a sort of diminishing returns? That isn't really where it's at?
Yeah, it's a diminishing returns. And it also may, just because you get their attention and people sign up doesn't mean there's not refunds. There's a short game versus a long game.
Yeah.
Sure, in the short game, you could do that stuff. Simon Sinek in his book, Start With Why, I think it's one of the very first things he says I'm not going to say that, I can't say that the marketing tactics of the mainstream world don't work, because they do. They can get people to buy. It's frightening for people in the UK watching Darren Brown things. You start to realize, oh God, it's terrifying what we can be made to do. So these tactics can work to get people to buy, but they can't get people to be loyal. They could get you to vote for somebody, but they couldn't get you to be longtime loyal to the candidate or believe in that person. So there's just limits of these things. And the challenge with that short-term approach is you're stuck always doing it. Why? Because you're burning through the list and disappointing people. And now what you have to contend with is bad word of mouth. Like when I went to Amsterdam, this is a funny little story. One day I get an email from somebody in Amsterdam. They say, Tad, somebody in Amsterdam stole your website. I said, what the hell? And sure enough, there it was, marketingvoorhippies.nl. And literally the about page, like about marketing for hippies, was my page translated into Dutch.
Wow.
I never would have known. Somebody just, randomly saw it. And so I emailed the guy and I say, dude, this is not cool. He said, well, I just didn't think you would ever be in the Netherlands, and I just was going to keep it local, and I like your work so much. And I wasn't actually that upset, because I know when I started, there's a reason it's called copywriting. I lifted some stuff from other people's websites. So I just said, this is not, please, would you take it? And he did. God bless him. And I said, well, look, no hard feelings. When I come to the Netherlands, we'll have beers. And so years later, I actually did go to the Netherlands, and we met at Café Noorderlicht in northern Amsterdam, and we got hammered together. We never talked about it. But guess who was hosting my workshop and got me 60 people? Was this guy.
Wow.
But in leading up to the workshop, I started getting messages from people and emails, and basically trying to find out what was going to happen at the workshop. And I remember I replied to one person, because I knew there was something underneath. I said, well, from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock, I'll talk about marketing. Then we'll take an hour and a half for lunch. And then from 2:30 to 6, I'll talk more about marketing. I said, but I imagine there's something else you want to know. Yeah. Is this just going to be a pitch for your day-long things, or for your coaching programs? And then I realized what happened was a bunch of Americans, colleagues, had gone over there and done that.
Quick interruption to tell you about my book, Embodiment. Creatively named, hey? Actually, Embodiment, Moving Beyond Mindfulness. You can find this online at theembodimentbook.com. That's theembodimentbook.com. So this book is an introduction to the whole field. If you like these interviews, you'll probably love this book. Funny stuff, poems, personal stories from my life, illustrating what embodiment is all about, and loads for professionals in the field too. Top teaching tips, language tips, that kind of thing. Yeah, a real condensation of everything I've learned about embodiment, basically. So you can get pre-orders at Amazon.com, and if you just put in Embodiment Moving Beyond Mindfulness, that's the name of the book, or go to theembodimentbook.com. On there, you'll see quotes from various teachers, a bunch of fun illustrations, and you can also get the first chapter completely free online at theembodimentbook.com. Enjoy, and back to the interview. We've all been burnt by marketing in some way, right? Maybe not quite in these American style things you're talking about, but like in some way we've bought a product, felt ripped off, didn't have a long-term relationship with a supplier. And I guess the concept that maybe it's been most useful for me from your work, and your work has been super useful for me. I felt like I knew there was something in marketing that was good, not just tolerable, but good. and I couldn't find someone. I found your stuff. I was like, finally, someone talking about this stuff. But one of the ones that's been most useful for me is the second part of the fit. Like, if you find a good fit and your niching work, I just recommended it to a mentee 2 hours ago, your book on niche. And, she was like, do I work with this group or that group? And how do I decide? Right. And I'm like, well, who's a good fit for you? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that's, I've got to credit Ari Galper. He's got a website, unlockthegame.com, does amazing stuff around sales. He was the first one, because I grew up working for a franchise of Tony Robbins and a lot of the sales stuff, Tom Hopkins, Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, Tony, and it was all hinged on this: go for the sale, get the close. That was the basis of it. And when I came across Ari Galper stuff, it was called reverse selling at the time. And it was, we've probably, hopefully in our lives, all had moments like this where somebody offered us, you hear something and you just suddenly are liberated in a way that you didn't even know you needed to be. And he was the first one that said, what if the goal of marketing wasn't to get the sale, but was to get to the truth of if it's a fit or not? And I'd never even considered that marketing might be about having a fit or establishing that. And so when I start my workshops, I say, so this question, is it a fit? It doesn't seem like much, but it hinges on at least two things. One, what's it? That's a big question. What the hell is it that you're selling? And most people can't define that. And second, what do we mean by fit? Who's it for? Who's it not for? And these are very, simple questions, but not easy to answer. And it's such a fundamental difference in orientation, because if I stand up at the front of a room and let's say I have 100 people there, and I say, and everything I'm doing is trying to get them to sign up for my weekend workshop. And let's say I'm really successful in that they all sign up. And my colleagues say, Ted, that's a 100% conversion rate. Oh, wow, look at that. No one would question it. I just almost guarantee none of my colleagues would say, 100%, that seems a little strange. They just high fives everywhere. But then we go to the weekend itself. And now the reality is there's a bunch of them that shouldn't be there. Right. And if you've been to a workshop or led a workshop with people that shouldn't be, you just get it. It's bad news. And afterwards, there's bad word of mouth from those people. Plus, it kills the vibe and buzz for everyone else. But if instead I stand up in front of the same group and I say, look, I've got a weekend workshop coming up. It's really not for everybody. So let me be as clear as I can about what it is, what it isn't, how I do it, how I don't, who it's for, who it's not for. And if it, feels like a fit, here's a special deal, and then I get a third of the, response. And my colleagues will say, Ted, you're losing your touch. You got 100% on that last one. Only a third on this one.
Right people who are going to love it. They're going to tell all their friends. You're going to have a good time. They're going to have a great time. You're going to do your best work, your deepest work. Ted, can I give an example of this from one of my... Just because I took this principle on, right? I'm just been training a new course manager for one of our larger courses. It's a year-long course. And it's a big thing. And when we're with people for a year, we want to really make sure they're the right people. Because I've just found it's a total pain in the ass if they're not. And then we get bad press. We might have to give refunds. There's not enough profit margins to do that in a way. So I sat down with the new course manager and said, look, you're going to do an hour interview with every candidate. And we normally turn 50% of people away. And I said, here's the 5 kinds of people we don't want. So we don't want people who are too new age. We don't want people who are too damaged and they need therapy. We don't want people who aren't open to learning. We don't want people who are fundamentalists about embodiment, because we do multiple perspectives. And I sat down and said, these are the 5 kinds of people that we've seen get on badly. And then conversely, you can flip all those and say, the people we want are the ones that are multiple perspectives, open-minded, not too damaged, blah, blah, blah. And she was like, but we're going to lose a lot of people. And I said, I hope so, Daniela. I really hope so.
Yes. Exactly. It's funny when I talk about filtering in my workshops, I say, I just want to be clear. I'm not talking about this fundamentally as a philosophical something. I'm talking about this as an architectural, structural something in your marketing where you have to build it in. And what you're saying is, it's right on in my perspective, is it comes from experience. You're going to make some guesses in the beginning of who you're the best fit for and who you're not. And you'll be right about some things, wrong about others. But over time, you do start to get a sense, if you're willing to reflect on it honestly, some people it works for, some it doesn't. So you start to write that down. And then that can go on a homepage or on the About My Ideal Client page. But it's also got to work. It has to function. And what that means is if you find that a bunch of your clients are showing up and they're not a fit, well, that means your marketing didn't work, in my perspective.
Right.
Something failed. And so then you need another system. So this idea of having an hour-long call, perfect. Because for some people, what they find is actually everyone who comes is pretty much an ideal client. Great. You don't need to worry about the filtering. Somehow it's already happening. But if you start to find, there's a bunch of people who are I'm having to refund and it's a drag to have them, then, you've got to weave that into your sales letter. And if they're not reading the sales letter and the sales letter doesn't work, then I created something years ago called the Are You Sure page. And I, for a program I have called the Meantime, because people were signing up. And the deal was it's $100 for a 30-day program and it's a double your money back guarantee. So I guarantee you're going to make $100 profit on this because you either make it from what I teach you, or I'll not only refund the $100 you paid, I'll send you $100 in addition out of my own pocket. So first year I had 120 people sign up. I've never hit those lofty heights again, but it was nice. And but there were refunds. There, I don't know, 5, 10 refunds or something. And what struck me was the refunds were not TAD. That was a bad program. It was, I didn't realize we'd be using a Facebook group, and I'm not on Facebook really. Or this was for service providers and I make products. Or I didn't realize there'd be so much homework in between the calls. So I said, oh, okay, got it. So filtering. So I went back to the sales letter and I made sure that stuff was really prominent and clear. Next year, less refunds, but still, and the same things. I just thought, shit, read the sales letter, but of course they're not going to. And that's my responsibility. So then I made it where when people clicked on the Purchase Now button for the sales letter, it took them to a page that I called my Are You Sure page. And there was a video where I just said, hi, Tad Hargrave here. My guess is if you're seeing this page, you just want to sign up for the Meantime program. And thank you very much. I'm flattered you'd want to. My guess also is that you didn't actually read the whole sales there. I don't blame you. I don't myself. But there was important stuff on it from a filtering to see if it's a fit. And I've cut and pasted that stuff below. And I'm going to ask that you actually read that now and then sit with it for a couple of minutes. If it still feels like a fit, I'm thrilled to have you in the program. And if not, I hope I'll see you down the road. And when I told a colleague this, they had the same response. That basically said, well, have you tested it? But what do they mean? You're going to lose people. And well, yes, that's the point. That's right. I'm losing the right people who shouldn't be there. And then, but the responses were twofold. One general type of response was, I was already excited about the program. I knew it was a fit. But when I read over in detail who it's for, I was more excited. This is definitely a fit for me.
I have a warning video, and when we send them this warning video saying, hey, you guys need to be warned that I swear and stuff like that, and we talk about this and that, and it gets people more engaged and enrolled who are the good fit.
Yes. Yeah. And the ones
get some people off, which is fine.
And the ones who aren't, people would say, you know what, I was really excited for the program, but then I realized we're about to do a road trip with my family in a camper van for 5 weeks, and it overlaps with your program. And I thought, well, I could do a 90-minute call, but with the Facebook group and the homework in between, it's just madness. Thank you so much for not just taking my money. I trust you more now.
Trust. That's the big thing, right? The whole of marketing for me is about trust. And if you're not authentic from the beginning, when people meet the new person who's not the one that sold them the thing in the first place, they're going to be like, well, who's this new motherfucker? Like, I can't trust you because you pretended to be someone else before.
It's a very disconcerting feeling. Yeah. When you go to a workshop and it's lovey vibes and they're just so empathetic and compassionate and kind. And then you realize it's not a fit and you go for a refund and that person is gone now.
Right.
And all of a sudden it's this cold, austere, and it's a very jarring feeling. But the thing is, in my mind, the agenda to get the sale is not a trustworthy agenda. So no one will trust you if you're coming from this place where the fundament of your operation is, how do I get them to buy? I remember this has only happened once. And I think this happened just so I could have this workshop to share in interviews like this. This was, 15 years ago. We were trying to create a little green business network in town. And so all the usual suspects were there from the local green business scene. And we met at the Varscona Theater in Edmonton. We're sitting on the stage. It was just had free space and sitting in a circle. And we just did a go around of introductions. And this guy was there. None of us knew who this guy was. But when I got to him, he said, So, well, I'm an accountant, and I'm just here to see how much of your money I can get from your wallets and stuff into my pockets. I mean, he literally said that. I'm not exaggerating, and I'm not playing it up. Those were almost exactly his words. And we all just sat there, looked at him, just, wow, that's amazing.
Different values there.
But yeah, so the I was glad he was at least overt about it. I was glad that he was at least overt about saying my agenda is to get your money and stuff it into my pockets. At least we knew. But it's still not a trustworthy agenda.
Right. And a nice analogy is romance I use a lot, right? Like you're not trying to marry everyone. You're looking for someone who's a good fit with you, right? And people who approach kind of like pickup stuff with this, like just trying to get the result. There's something unpleasant about that, I think, for everyone. And it's the same. I think the parallel with marketing works really well. Like you're actually looking for those ethical, intimate connections that are a good fit for everyone, and both people walk away feeling good, or are you just going for the outcome and it's crappy and unsustainable anyway?
Yeah, I mean, 11 years ago or so, I got deep into the pickup stuff, just, my own awkwardness with women and dating. And it's interesting, even the language pickup, it just is, it's another way of saying get the sale. It's another way of saying get what you want. Even the rendering of it. It's not, you notice that these courses are not a course on how to court the one that you desire. It's not that. It's not even, I mean,
yes. Get anyone.
When it's not time. Yeah, right. And this is the thing. Yeah, get anyone.
Would you want anyone? It's like get any client, right? Do you want any client, really?
Yeah. And of course, this plays on the desperation that people feel because they don't have enough clients. So they imagine, well, if I just had a full roster, even if they were terrible, it'd be great. Nope. But I've seen this. I've seen it, in the pickup stuff. I've seen it in the sales stuff. Use these stealth hidden tactics, which is just interesting. The fact that you need to hide them says something might be wrong. But these tactics that will get anyone to say yes. But it's not possible. That's just, it's not a real promise. It's a false offer that they're making because none of us are that powerful.
Sure. Actually, I looked into it. Their stats are pretty bad. It's anyone is maximum 5%, and if you were to look at it long term, I think it would be a lot less. But there's definite parallels between sort of, the two things that I find quite interesting. And Tad, I want to land this for listeners. So someone out there is running a karate school, or they're teaching a 5 rhythms class twice a week, or they've got a meditation class. This is the kind of listeners we have. Like this, can you say how some of this might apply to them? So the guy running the karate school, he's looking for the students who are a good fit for him, right?
Yeah. Well, there are a few things I would say. I mean, part of it is the karate school trying to reach everybody? Because certainly there are, just as let's say with yoga classes, there are lots of different sub niches that people have. I imagine there could be the same for karate. So is it a women's self-defense? Is it primarily a focus on building confidence in young men? Is it coming from a very particular school of thought about karate, from a particular lineage? There's so many ways that one could approach it. So that's the very first thing is this a karate studio just for everybody? Is that what we're going for? On my website, nichingspiral.com, under the free stuff, there's some articles, and one of them is a list of niches I've seen in yoga, and I've got a bunch to even add to it.
Yoga's hugely niche now, isn't it? It's like for Latino pregnant women who are left-handed, it's like hardcore niche these days.
Yeah, I've seen, and some ridiculous and some amazing. I was in Toronto leading a workshop just recently. I looked across the street, and there it was, the Ganja Yoga Studio. So people it's like weed, cannabis plus yoga. Amazing.
There's a stone jiu-jitsu studio as well. That amazed me. People get stoned and do jiu-jitsu. I was like, really? I don't want to fight anyone, but okay.
That's amazing. But yeah, so that's the first thing I would wonder about is just in terms of the sort of target market and who it's for. Has there been any discernment there? And then the other thing, and this is something I talk a lot about these days, is point of view in marketing. And to be very clear, this is the way I see my work. So, if your ideal client is on island A and they want to be on island B, island A is where they have the problem, island B where there's a result they're craving, your business is like a boat that could take them from one island to the other. And it's really important to be clear about two things point of view wise. First is what's your point of view about the journey from island A to island B, but also what's your point of view about the boat itself and how that boat should be constructed? And the reality is most of us are, in reality, deeply opinionated about this stuff. We don't have no opinion about it. And that becomes part of the filtering, where it's, look, if you join this studio, here's our deal. These are our expectations. This is the way we come to it. And if you're not on board with that, go. Like I just had a conversation just last night with a friend of mine, lives in ostensibly a community house, but it's actually just a bunch of hippie anarchists who are committed to doing their own thing and screw the group, but she was talking about, for years, she's tried to wrangle some community out of these people, and there's nothing. And even to the point where somebody moved out after being there for a year and said, well, let's have a farewell dinner, like some sort of community ritual, something. And then an hour before, that woman who'd already moved into a new place said, I don't know, does anyone really want to do it? And one by one, people started dropping off, And so I said, well, the question of how do you get these people to be more community minded is moot.
Right. Because they didn't sign up for that, right?
You've got to start with when people move in and say, here's the deal.
Yeah, if you want to live here, we meet, have dinner once a week. We do this, we do that. Yeah.
And if you're not into that, don't come. Don't bother us. Go away. And so there's a similar thing, when people will come to me and say, oh, I have a holistic studio. So, okay, if you're going to niche as a holistic studio, and I think this could fit for the meditation and the karate and all this, you have two choices, basically, in my mind. The first is you can do the local thing. So you can say, we're going to niche based on this postal code. And what that means is you have a booth at the farmer's market and the different shows. You go around, introduce yourself to all the local businesses. You send out a postcard to that, postal code. You just become very present in your community. So when people are thinking, oh, I need some holistic health solutions or karate or whatever, well, this is the neighborhood place. Everyone has kind of adopted that that's a legitimate way to go. The other way to go is you niche by a kind of topic or issue or something like that. Now, if you're going to do that, you've got one of two approaches. The first is you could pick a group of people who you just love and you think, I want to spend the rest of my days with these people. And you wonder, what could we do together?
Right.
And the fundament of it is the love you have for each other. And it almost doesn't matter what you do together. And there's projects that have come out of that where people just sit and discern for a while and say, you know what? Oh, we're actually all excited about this. So let's do that. Or the other option is Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, a program in the States, a lot of people probably know. It's called The Daily Show because it was run by Carson Daly. And when he took it over, it was a prank show, basically. It was fake reporters making fun of the public and putting them in awkward situations. And when Jon Stewart took it over, he said, no, there's a higher opportunity here, which is not to make fun of the public, but to lampoon the media and their bias towards sensationalism and conflict and the satire of the hypocrisy of people in power. And it took him 3 years to turn that boat around. Because a lot of the old guard, John, come on, let's just do this thing where we make fun of people and it's funny and chill out. It took him 3 years to turn the boat around. So if you have a holistic studio or a center like this and you have teachers, there's a lot of filtering of those people.
Yes.
And saying, here's our deal. This is the philosophy and point of view we run by. And if you're not on board with that philosophy, so, one example, a friend of mine has a holistic studio and she really decided to focus on this biomechanical approach. There will be no Reiki here. There's no energy healing here. This is, structural, biomechanical, still holistic, but not coming from this. Yeah. So, but what a lot of people do, I've seen, as they say, right, okay, yeah, I talked to Tad, he said I should niche. So they pull in all their practitioners from their studio and they say, okay, what do you think we should do? Let's come up with something together. And it's just pointless. It's a disaster because people are not on the same page enough. So you either have to start with the group and find something, or you have to, you be the person and you just decide this is what this is. And then, depending on what it is, then there's this question of marketing and how do people find you? And let's say, I don't know if there are any of your clients who have these centers and studios who have a particular focus, a particular niche Are there any you can think of off the top of your head? Or
Well, like yoga studios I know who just do hot yoga, or yoga studios who do much more. I know one studio locally that tends to be pretty much over 50s. They don't ever say that, but that's just most of the client group tend to be kind of older. So the yoga tends to be kind of gentler there, stuff like that.
Amazing. So let's say over 50 yoga studio. So what we know then is there's a certain demographic they're working with, and we know there's certain things that will be true about that demographic. We know the women, are probably on the other side of menopause at this point. We know that certain physical ailments are likely to be there. So you could, as that yoga studio, I mean, first of all, the hubs for you would be possibly some of these senior citizen shows, possibly, but you might also find other businesses that are doing complementary things with that group.
Great. So this is just to jump in here. Once you know who you work with, you can find out easily where they are, who connect you to those people, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the ways you start to realize, our niche is not that clear because you can't find any hubs. I've seen this at workshops, and we sit there and just rack our brains on trying to figure out hubs, and people just kind of sit there quietly, can't figure it out. And then I realized, the niche, we thought it was clear. Because there are a lot of pseudo-clear niches where people say, I work with people who are stressed, as if that's not every human. Or I work with people going through transition, as if everything in life is not a...
Right.
So this becomes the very first thing, and it's not just there was a restaurant that just closed sadly near me, and it called Nourish, but it was a superfood elixir bar, and so there are two different ways to approach niching. We could say there's the artist and the entrepreneur. So the entrepreneurial approach to niching is where you start with who's the underserved market, who's the hungry crowd. You start with who and the issue they have, the result they're craving, and then you design a product after. The artist approach is you start with what you want to do, how you want to do it, and then later you think, who would be interested in this? And so most of, I would say probably you and my clients are more in the artist thing. They didn't start their business because they saw an underserved target market. They started because they love the holistic thing.
5 rhythms or embodiment or whatever. Yeah.
And so then that's like Van Gogh, where he couldn't help himself but make this art. Everyone thought he was an asshole. Nobody wanted to buy from him while he was alive. And yet he still couldn't help himself. So that's the affliction of the artist and the affliction of the entrepreneur. Of course, we all have friends like this. They can't help but see business opportunities. Oh my God, somebody make a fortune with this. And
every complaint I hear I see a business opportunity. And now I've studied this stuff. Yeah. And what about, I have students who they go, listen, I want to do stress workshops. I love working with stress. And I could work with single moms because I'm a single mom. My Danish student I was talking to today, actually. And she said, but I could also work with business people. And I used to work in fashion. And I kind of like all these people. And I can imagine it working for all of them. Where would you go with someone like that who is just like, I can almost see several niches that are possible? Do you just choose? Is it who do you love the best? Is it who's got the most money? I mean,
oh man, this is tough. I mean, I just sympathize. Basically, it's a difficult thing because I remember I had a client where a part of it is I start to listen for, are there these kind of niches that are abstract and coming out of nowhere in a way that there's nothing particular about that group of people and that issue that, there was a woman I talked with in New Jersey or something. She did Ayurvedic nutrition, and that was her thing. And she said, well, I was thinking I could work with female entrepreneurs and all this, but I just thought, I didn't see the fit. I didn't see the connection between Ayurvedic nutrition and why would they want this? What's their particular issue? That just wasn't clear. And we talked about it, and I said, what the hell got you into this? And she said, I had fibromyalgia and really bad. I couldn't do anything. And I tried all the things. And finally I tried Ayurveda, and now I have no symptoms. I'm totally fine. And I said, well, couldn't you offer this to people? And for some reason that had never occurred to her. So certainly it's not always true, but it's often true that your deepest wound is the doorway to your truest niche. The things you've struggled with the most, you just have a certain credibility,
empathy, you can speak their language, you get their point of view, right? Like it just helps so much.
Yeah. So, and it's not always, I wish it were always that easy. Sometimes there are a few other ways this can go. Another something is it may be, well, first of all, that it doesn't just have to be one. I invite people to say, there's your ideal client. There's what I call the big circle. Generally, who do you want to work with? So that might be, my mom and her husband have a tree farm. Generally, people who want to buy trees. There's their ideal client. Now, but there are subgroups within that of acreage owners or reclamation companies. For me, hippie entrepreneur, kind of, conscious entrepreneur types, but there are subgroups of that. And one way to say it could be, life coaches, holistic practitioners, permaculture people. Another way to say it would be people who just feel gross about marketing, or people who feel okay about marketing, but why is niching so hard? Or marketing feels good, my niche is clear, but how do I get people to find me? So I would say if you have a top like 3, it's just that they are related to each other. I just had a session with a woman the other day, and she said she was a life coach, but she also does corporate work. But as she talked, they were so different. And I said, these are different websites.
Yeah.
Basically.
I have a student who's a stripper and a psychotherapist. And it's like she needs 2 different websites, right?
Yes.
They don't help each other to be combined.
No, if you're a butcher, a baker, and a candlestick maker, there's 3 different websites, and so she was relieved. I could hear her just sigh, like, oh, okay, I don't have to somehow find the golden thread. But what's also possible is there's a great website called the League of Adventurous Singles, I think it's called. And it's a dating website, and she helps people with their dating life. And I think they've changed a bit. If you go to marketingforhippies.com/homepage or homepages, it's a blog post. But there were 4 subsections within this dating world of something like sort of dating, newly single, totally not dating, or but it was just but it was the same person. I realized when I looked at, this is all the same person at different stages in their journey. So that can be another way to contextualize the niches. You start to look at, there's all these different groups. Wait a minute, are they different groups, or is this all the same person? And there's different moments. And one of the best questions I've ever heard around niching came from a colleague of mine, Jeffrey Van Dyke, where he said, what's the perfect moment for you to show up in their life? It's such a good question, because what it presumes is there's a moment it's too soon.
Yeah.
And there's a moment it's too late. And so if you can hone in on what's that moment, you get a more storied understanding of, and it's really good sales copy then, because you can say, look, if you're in this situation, you're struggling in this way, we could be a good fit. But I mean, in sort of direct response with this person, it's just tricky finding out, because there are so many options, and there may just, but Mark Silver at one point, he made this distinction, which I thought was so important. It's just like your life purpose is not your niche.
Nice.
He said from a Sufi understanding, all of our life purpose is just to keep opening our hearts wider and wider. That's our purpose as humans. Or certain indigenous people might understand the purpose of humans is to feed the divine, to feed the holy in the world through our speech and the beauty that we make with our hands. So niche is just a business consideration. That's it. It's not a deep, it doesn't necessarily, I mean, yes, pick something that's fulfilling and that is going to work, sure, but it's not, I think people make it a bigger, more fraught.
This is the
deal.
essence of who I am and my heart of my soul. And on some level, it's just it's a humanistic business choice. It's not.
Yeah.
Wow,
and
right?
and and to tie it back to dating too, this is the travesty of the nuclear family is suddenly your romantic partner has to be a stand-in for the whole village.
Right.
And we do that with our businesses. Oh, but this business has to fulfill every part of me. No, it doesn't. It has to make you money and fulfill you in certain ways, but that's why you have friends and hobbies and community. So take some pressure off your business to be every damn thing for you, because it's too big a burden.
Tad, we need to wrap up, but this is such a shame. I feel like already I want to invite you back. I'm really hearing just a need for ethical approaches to marketing from the whole embodiment world. Like I'd say of my students, once they've graduated from basic courses, like 80% of what they ask me about as a mentor is marketing. And just having some very basic skill in this area, I just a lot of yoga teachers and fire rhythm teachers ask me for coffees to talk to them about this. And I just say, look, you should talk to Tad, And I like to finish here, like a couple of recommendations of other people's stuff that could, other people's stuff that's out there that's good. And then also, what are your own websites? What are your own places where people can find you?
Oh gosh, there's a lot of good colleagues out there. I mean, it depends. Heartofbusiness.com, Mark Silver, I love. He comes from I'd say my stuff comes from generally a more political perspective, whereas his come maybe more spiritual. But if you are drawn to this kind of Sufi spirituality, he's beautiful work. And George Cow does a lot of nuts and bolts stuff around creating online courses, Facebook advertising, and very deeply committed to, and so KAO, so GeorgeKao.com. And if you want a sassier vibe, there's my colleague Rebecca Tracy, theuncagedlife.com, and she's
Rebecca Tracy was that?
Rebecca Tracy, yeah. And then there's Julie Wolk, WOLK, and she has a very nature-based philosophy. So everything in her business approach is using metaphors from nature, and she's a really dear woman, and that's a few. And then I guess for me,
man.
Yeah, for me.
So what about you? Tell us where can we find your stuff?
Marketingforhippies.com, and then if you're struggling with niche, nichingspiral.com.
Tad, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to send this out to all my mentees, and I hope it's been just super useful for listeners. My guess is it has been, so thank you.
You're welcome.
Some ways to get more, to give back, and to get more involved now. So the biggest request I have would be to share the podcast with your friends, people that you think would really enjoy it. Email it to them, put it on your social media, tell them about it, old school. Really appreciate that. Equally, if you want to support us financially, you can go to Patreon. That's patreon.com/embodiment podcast and give us $1 an episode. And I'd say they're well worth $1. So that's less than £1 if you're in UK-ish. So yeah, please go there. On the embodiedfacilitator.com website is where this is hosted. If you're, most people I think listen to for iTunes. iTunes, we'd certainly appreciate a review. The way iTunes works means that a review means more people will find it. iTunes regards it as more important for searches. So even a couple of sentences review really does help as a little thank you to us. And if you want to go to embodiedfacilitator.com, you can see the actual, links to the sites. There's comments on there. The Facebook group tends to be where people discuss things. So if you go to put in the Embodiment Podcast into Facebook, there's a page which is relatively quiet and a group which does have some discussion on. So I will reply to things personally there. So also on embodiedfacilitator.com website, there's all sorts of freebies there. There's videos, there's free ebooks, there's ebooks you can buy. And of course, there's our newsletter list. If you want to stay in touch and learn about things like the Embodied Facilitator course and our next Embodied Yoga Principles teacher training, then go to that website and you'll see a little pop-up and you can get the newsletter through there. Okay, so I think they're the main ones. Tell your friends, pay us some money on Patreon, give us a review on iTunes, send us your email if you want to be on the newsletter list, and get involved on the Facebook there. Bit long. Pick whatever you like that works for you. Until next time, welcome home to the body.